Hello everyone and welcome to another Informatica webinar. Really excited to be joined here today by both Hartford HealthCare and Deloitte to share this exciting story about how they used Axon and EDC to power their data governance program at Hartford HealthCare. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Thomas Brents. I'm the Director of Product Marketing with Informatica in charge of data quality and data governance. And I'm joined today by Ron Msadakis and George Samuel. Gentlemen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Ron Msadakis from Hartford HealthCare. I'm the Director of Enterprise Data Intelligence, and my team works on enterprise information management. That's data warehousing, master data management, and data governance.
Greetings. This is George Samuel with Deloitte Consulting. I'm with the Analytics and Cognitive Practice of Deloitte. So I focus on advising clients to get more value from the data assets they own by helping them enable capabilities in MDM, data governance, and analytics. I've provided these services successfully to clients in multiple industries, and the last few years, my focus has been on healthcare industry. We do have a very exciting topic for discussion today. From the perspective of data governance, I would like to share some of the learnings we have, from the Hartford HealthCare story. When we look at, you may know more and more healthcare organizations are understanding the value of data management and analytics, and they're making huge investments to stand up advanced capabilities in this area. But due to multiple reasons, data governance is an area some of these organizations often struggle to start the project, or sometimes unable to make progress once they have started the program. So our session will cover the approach to start a data governance program, key projects you can undertake to demonstrate the value of data governance to stakeholders, areas you should watch out for in executing this project, and leading practice in this area. So we hope you will join us for the session on May 31st as we share real-life experience from enabling data governance capabilities for Hartford HealthCare using Informatica's Axon and Enterprise Data Catalog. So with today's agenda, we would, though we have a larger agenda for the session on May 21st, so let me go over that agenda quickly. Overview of Hartford HealthCare Organization, the data excellence journey at Hartford, why data governance is needed, right, and to implement data governance that incorporates people, process, and technology. Overview of data governance technology enablement projects using Axon and EDC, and lessons learned from this project, including leading practices. But for today's webinar, we'll focus on a subset of the agenda, starting with an overview of Hartford HealthCare Organization, overview of the data excellence journey at Hartford, and what are the triggers that drives the need for data governance, and the approach to enable data governance, and wrapping up with a quick overview of data governance project at Hartford.
So let's move on to a look at our excellence journey with Deloitte. We started about 18 months ago with an enterprise analytics roadmap. And this roadmap was executed by us with the help of Deloitte in order to come up with a strategy for getting to the next generation of analytics, the generation of analytics that's beyond just reports and dashboards. And from that roadmap, there were a number of use cases that came out. One of them, and probably the most striking use case because it was the most adverse event, and we had very recent issues with our providers and mastering the providers. So we got together and created a provider master domain in a coexistence model where we gather up data from a number of different systems, use trust rules to automatically create a golden record, and that golden record is consumed by people all over the organization. On the success of the provider master, we then went and created a location master, where we're keeping information on all of the locations that are of significance to Hartford HealthCare. And I say that because it's not just clinical locations, it's also other offices and our billing staff, our central scheduling. And from there, now we're embarking on a data governance project in order to be able to maximize the vast amounts of data that the healthcare industry is collecting. Just a little bit about Hartford HealthCare. We have about 4,800 providers who work for us or are in our network. We service 126 of the towns and cities in Connecticut, as well as some surrounding areas in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We experienced 502,000 primary care visits in our fiscal 2018 and 443,000 inpatient days among our 6 hospitals. We are just about 20,000 employees, and our operating revenue, our book of business, is about $3.1 billion in fiscal 2018. So we're a complete healthcare delivery network. We're a tertiary care teaching hospital as our anchor, along with a number of community hospitals and smaller hospitals. But we also have the state's most extensive behavioral health network. We have, of course, our physicians, our multi-specialty physicians, primary care and specialists. And the thing that makes us the most comprehensive of the healthcare networks in the state of Connecticut is that we also have a regional home care system for visiting nurses, as well as rehabilitation services and services for senior care. And we are, per the rules of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, we're an accountable care organization. So let's get on to the topic of data governance. Why do we need data governance? The answer is very simple if you start looking around. First of all, who's spending hours or days verifying a new report before it's sent to a regulatory agency? How much time is spent verifying data before you send data out to somebody who's asking you for it? What gaps do you have in a report? How are your metrics failing because you have an area that may not be as fastidious in capturing data as other areas? How many projects have been delayed or have failed? We experienced this in 2015 where we were trying to generate quality statistics but found that the data just were not consistently being captured, and it was very difficult. We had marginal success with it, but not the full successes we were looking for. Where are process errors occurring? Are there products going out to the wrong place? Are there errors in your payroll? Are you making phone calls to the wrong place? Are you sending out mailers for Medicare to people in their 20s? How many metric wars do you have in your organization where people are holding on to 2 different reports and the same metric shows 2 different values? How many reports do you have in your backlog that might have already been done? And it's very easy, to create a report and then 18 months later you kind of forget it's there and somebody creates a request and before you know it, you have something in your backlog that's something very similar. What are metrics definitions that people have disagreements with? In healthcare, when we say the term length of stay is a very important term in healthcare. But when we say length of stay, it means different things to different people. All of these definitions are valid. What we need to do with data governance is take each of those definitions, validate them as real definitions, define them, and make sure that we communicate to people that people understand the differences among these. So when we look at other compelling reasons for data governance, data is now becoming the core of business. Data is something that you collect data is something that your workflows are based on, and data is something that's very important to make decisions on. A couple of quotes from the Gartner Group. Poor data quality is a primary reason that 40% of all business initiatives fail to meet their targets. Also, data quality issues result in up to 20% of a labor productivity issue. And that labor productivity issue may come in the form of a vice president looking at a report and saying, no, I don't believe these numbers. These numbers are wrong. And, the VP will hand the report to somebody, and that person, ask that person to go figure out why the report is wrong. By the way, when you're looking for data stewards, that person's your data steward. So people responsible for the capture of the data need to be understanding of the impact of their work. Data as a corporate asset, as an asset to the enterprise, is no longer just something that's collected locally and works for the local person. Any data that's captured by your organization needs to be available to anybody in the enterprise who needs it. People consuming the data as information need to be able to trust that data. Once again, I don't believe these numbers. Well, let's give them the data that proves the data. Duplication of effort runs rampant when there's not understanding of the resources that are available. You have little data islands that people are maintaining, and they're getting reports out via Excel, but then somebody else in a different department has another data item, and they're getting data out in Excel. And data governance is meant to take all these activities, all these wastes, and by centralizing the activities surrounding the data and ensuring that data are good proactively before you see those reports, you can minimize the amount of labor required to just process data. So George?
Yeah. So data governance projects are successful when people, process, and technology areas come together. So it's very important to understand and engage stakeholders effectively by creating awareness, educating them on the value of data governance, and utilizing the change management functions from a people's perspective. So if you look at from a policies and procedures, those are important. It's very important to ensure the standards and processes are in place for the effective functioning of the data governance program and the data governance council. So when you look at technology, the technology selected needs to align with the organizational IT landscape and the skills availability, which is very important. So to train the project team members or to enhance their skill sets, along with the formal training, taken into consideration the mentoring activities. This should be established as early as possible for effective transition from consulting partners, if they are engaged in the project team. So let's take a look at, where do we get started? So there's a struggle for a lot of organizations, right? What is the right approach? How do I show value of data governance? How do I convince my sponsors? A good way to start data governance initiative is with a small project with a very well-defined scope and clear outcomes. So look at areas where you can demonstrate value. Sometimes it could be in data quality monitoring, establishing a small business glossary, establishing a data lineage, etc. So at Hartford HealthCare, we have played out multiple scenarios and reviewed a whole list of use cases as a part of planning for the project and confirming the scope and the deliverables. So let's take a look at some of these projects, right? The first project was a pilot project. So to initiate the data governance program, we kind of utilize the approach, think big and start small. So 2 projects were executed in succession to demonstrate the value of data governance. The first one is a pilot project with a small scope focused on enabling some of the foundational functionalities. So let's look at some of those functionalities, right? Data quality monitoring, by applying the rules and metrics for about 25 attributes, implementation of business glossary for about 20 data definitions, and establishing a couple of basic workflows for change requests. So this project was done over a period of 10 weeks, which included the installation of Axon EDC, configuration of the application, getting confirmation on the use cases with stakeholders, establishing connectivity with the source system, and implementing the identified use cases. So as you can imagine, this was the first project or the pilot project, and several lessons were learned from this pilot project, which we utilized to plan for the next project. So let's spend a few minutes on the phase one of the project. So what we did over here is expand the scope with additional data domains, right, including some of the operational data and clinical data for EMR system as well as the HR systems. So since establishing lineage for some of the key Tableau reports was important, those additional items included in the scope from a Tableau report lineage perspective. So we focused on data quality metrics, data lineage, LDAP integration, email notifications to stakeholders for any changes or updates in the published metrics or data definitions. So these tangible data governance capabilities developed in these two projects will be used to socialize the data governance value to stakeholders in various business units across the enterprise before the launch of an enterprise-wide data governance program. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of lessons learned from this project. What works, what does not work from a people, process, and technology perspective. We look forward to sharing in person additional details and leading practices to enable data governance during the May 21st session in Las Vegas.
So if I could just add one more thing to what we've been saying about starting small. Often it's difficult to explain exactly what data governance is, especially to make a big investment into it. So if you start with a small investment and show value, now you have something that you can show to your executive team and be able to explain to them exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about data governance.
That's excellent. We often hear that same adage, right, of start small, think big, scale fast, right? And I think you guys have done that just expertly. It's perfect to choose the right pilot project and get off the ground very quickly, but also with a project you could be successful with. I wanted to go through a few questions with the two of you, if that would be all right. George, I wanted to start with you. Just in general, why is establishing data governance challenging for organizations?
Yeah, great question, Thomas. So this we hear it a lot of times in the sense there are multiple reasons, right? Organizations are unable to start or find it challenging to make progress in establishing governance capabilities. So let me go over a couple of major ones. So we already touched on it, trying to do too much in the early part of the projects, right, and not getting anywhere. And this is where the motto we just talked about, think big and start small, really helps. Keep in perspective, the larger program, but start with smaller projects with a very well-defined approach and demonstrate value quickly and continuously, which is very important. So another key aspect is take into consideration the influence of organizational culture on this project. So as we all know, change is not easy. People don't want to change things even if it's working for them because they are so used to it. So to address, this is very important and engage organizational change management team members so they can provide the right support, whether it's through training or conducting focus sessions to create awareness, empowering the data governance champions, etc. So those are a couple of ways you can address the challenges, especially trying to do too much. Also, the second one is addressing from an organizational culture perspective.
That's excellent. I want to come back and dive a little deeper into that culture change aspect in just a minute. But Ron, I want to flip to you. I know we kind of started around this question around what's the challenges and how you got started. Talk to me a little bit about how you really chose that first project and what were the challenges that you faced there with your organization as you kind of got started.
Well, the way to overcome the challenge of that entry vector, that first use case that can prove out the value, is to be looking around and be observing in your organization and find where the pain points are. So one of the pain points that we had was, do we have the correct address for our employees? And so this was one that we could solve with a series of queries, but we looked at this and said, this is a great first use case for data governance software. And once you have established that and have been able to make the small investment, now it should be able to kind of sell itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sell itself and kind of gain momentum. That in and of itself can pose a problem, can be challenging. And George, you sort of scratched the surface on culture change, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. I think often, even just the term data governance has a bit of a black eye at some organizations. Some have started and maybe not failed, but never really gained the momentum. And even the name itself, governance, right, feels like oversight. It feels like control. How do you deal with the culture change, just in any organization, so that you can really grow the program at organizations?
Yeah, very, very, very important question, right? So basically, from a culture perspective, and getting kind of buy-in from the stakeholders, especially senior stakeholders, extremely important, right? So one of the ways we can demonstrate, I know there are a lot of data governance programs, I have been contacted for, right, in the sense they all want to start the program, but, how do we start it? They always envision as data governance program as just establishing a certain council, policies and procedures. All this, when the executives looks at it, they look at it as, well, what is the tangible value for me, right? So to gain their confidence, the approach we have used at Hartford HealthCare is very critical, and it's very practical too, right? Demonstrate some tangible value through a couple of smaller projects. So we are asking for a very small investment, which takes care of the cultural aspect, addresses the technological aspects, all the people aspect. All those are being taken care, and demonstrate to the senior management, the executives, right? This is the right, show this is how the value can be achieved. So that's what we did at Hartford HealthCare, and Ron can add more to that. Basically that helped to demonstrate this is what data governance is. This is how it delivers value to the entire organization.
Yeah, why don't you expand on that a little bit, Ron? Tell me a little bit more about gaining executive level support, not just at the beginning, but just throughout, right? Because there's somebody that believes in the project, there's somebody that believes in the program overall, right? But how do you keep them engaged, and how do you get their peers and the other executives really bought into this, this idea of data governance?
Well, once you find that executive who's willing to see what data governance can do for that particular part of the house, by showing value, you can then convince the rest of the house. And remember, data governance is not a project, it's a program. If you try to take too large of a bite of it at one time, you're just going to collapse under your own weight. So it's basically to find that one executive who's having the pain point. Go look for the adverse event. Go look for the point where there's pain, get support for that, and then start at that location. at some point you do have to govern at an enterprise level, right? It cannot be just local. If you have a series of local governance programs, you don't have an enterprise governance program. But you do need to show what this can do. What really helped the cause was our executive leadership and our board committed to becoming an insight-driven organization. So once we had that commitment, we were allowed to start going down this road with the roadmap. And when that initial roadmap was approved by our executive leadership team, then that allowed us to be able to go forward. However, even though we live in Connecticut and not Missouri, there's still show me, right? You have to show value. You have to show that something is better. And it can actually become easy if you do it a little at a time. As I said, if you grab too much at a time, you will probably start collapsing under the weight of what it is you have to do.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said too. It's a program, not a project, right? The projects are the individual bits and bytes that add up to the program, but the program itself is the thing that kind of spans the organization, and it has to be enterprise level. It has to be across every department and every silo. One of the things that you said there about insight-driven organization, I love that. I love that phrase, insight-driven organization. And you're right, that can't happen at the departmental level, right? Because my insight and my view, my lens on the world in my department may be completely different than the numbers, the figures, or the data that's trusted in the finance department, for example, right? So it has to be something that's universally felt, and that doesn't happen without collaboration. So George, tell me a little bit about how you foster that collaboration between teams to break down those departmental level silos.
Yeah, so the learnings from, the learnings from the master data management projects, there's as you know, MDM projects are more enterprise level. The provider master project especially, we have to reach out to, multiple business units within the organization, right? So we really got a good sense of, how these different, departments or business units operate. And we were able to identify, the champions in those areas, right? So, engaging the champions and having them do some of the water cooler talk, in their own business units, that's definitely a big success, right? That's what we have done in multiple projects, and we were able to gain, kind of collaboration across the business units by identifying who those champions are and having them do the water cooler talk and do the heavy lifting behind the scene, and that really helped to, get alignment and get, commitment from various business units on that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think collaboration amongst teams is completely important to scaling data governance. And for a lack of better words, I think collaboration amongst the tools that you use is also important. So Ron, I'm going to come to you with the last question. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how the automation in those tools, the collaboration, the integration of them has really helped you to scale your program?
So the way I like to put it is I can have the best automotive tools in the world and still not be able to repair my car. Likewise, I could be the most skilled mechanic in the world and not be able to repair a car without the proper tools. So the tools and the processes go hand in hand. And the way that the tools help the automation is that, well, first of all, let's start with master data management and that provider master database, which we're using Informatica MDM for. For many years, we had people who maintain provider information, each having a different take on why they're maintaining this information, sending each other reports and, trying to decide whose report is correct and who has the better information and doing research. And so we had, for many years, these implicit rules where people knew kind of how to deal with this provider information as it came from these other areas. What the automation allowed us to do was every single night implement those rules and create the golden record so that by morning the most accurate information that we have for everybody is available to everybody. Moving on to the data governance in EDC, we recently crawled a very major reporting database that we use. And in 18 minutes, we returned metadata on over 27,000 tables, hundreds of views, many stored procedures. If we were to ask somebody to do that, it would take weeks or months. So the automation of the tool is very important because you're not putting resources into just figuring out what you have. That's what the tool is for. Another success that we had with this tool was once we had grabbed all that metadata for the reporting database, we crawled Tableau. And Informatica Enterprise Data Catalog, I like to use the term lit up, immediately lit up the lineage from Tableau to the reporting database. So now we have created documentation in Tableau of everything that these Tableau workbooks use without anybody taking any effort other than configuring for the crawl. So although you can start a data governance program and probably use SharePoint, I'm really not convinced you can get very far without using the tools.
Well, that's great, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, everything that we've talked about so far today, all the tools and even the collaboration between your team has just been so helpful in your approach to really scale this across your organization. Gentlemen, I wanted to thank each of you, Ron, George, for being here with me today, sharing your story, telling us about all the challenges you face, the hurdles that you overcome. I really appreciate it. I know in just a few weeks here we're going to be sharing this story in deeper detail at Informatica World. So for all of you listening, I hope that you do join us at Informatica World to learn even more and engage directly with George and with Ron. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you to all of you for listening with us and enjoying this story. Until next time, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.